All right, we're just going to give him, our praise. We're going to show him we love him in this place tonight. We're just going to lift him up and just, you know, if we don't have works that back it up to say, we could say we love him all we want. But if we don't, you know, express that, then it's in vain, right?
higher and higher and higher to you.
to die, poured out for all mankind. God's only Son, perfect and spotless one. He never sinned, but suffered as if he did. Come on, all authority. Let's sing this together. All authority, every victory, yours. All authority, every victory is yours. Savior, worthy of honor and glory, worthy of all of our praise. You are the King. Come on, sing that if you believe it. Jesus, awesome and powerful forever, awesome and great is your name. You are the King. Power in hand, speaking the Father's plan, sending us out, light in this broken land. All authority, every victory, yours. All authority, every victory, yours. Savior, worthy of honor and glory, worthy of all of our praise. You are the King. Jesus, awesome and powerful forever, awesome and great is your name. You are the King. We will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Everyone overcome. We will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Everyone overcome. Come on. We will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Everyone overcome. Sing Savior, come on. Savior, worthy of honor and glory, worthy of all of our praise. Jesus is in here. Come on. We will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Everyone overcome. We will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Everyone overcome. We will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Everyone overcome. Sing Savior. Savior, worthy of honor and glory, worthy of all of our praise. You overcame. Jesus, awesome and powerful forever. Awesome and great is your name. You overcame. You overcame. You overcame. You overcame.
You guys can be seated. For those of you that weren't here last week, we had Jonathan Keevil. He's a guy from Ohio that has moved down here to pursue ministry, and he kind of gave his testimony last week and shared his life story with us. And so it kind of inspired me tonight to, not to give my testimony, but just talk about the importance of giving your testimony and having it ready to actually give at any given moment. You never know, when somebody's going to need to know, your testimony, what you've been through, what God's done for you. And hopefully all of us in here can have an answer when somebody asks, why you do what you do. Why are you a Christian? Why are you saved? Why do you go to church? Is there a God? Hopefully y'all kind of have some answers to give for that. So tonight we're going to be talking about the value of your testimony. And Jonathan wasn't able to be with us tonight. He is, I believe, flying out tomorrow to go back to Ohio to pick up his wife, and then next week they're driving back down here, him and her. So she's finally being able to make the move down here. So he just wanted me to let y'all know that he wished he could be here, but he's got to go and pick his wife up. So when we talk about the value of your testimony, our passage comes from Acts chapter 22, verse 1 through 15. What? Acts 22, 1 through 15. You got it? You there, Joe? You want to read it? No. Can you read out loud? What are you doing?
I'm getting it up.
Why are you typing stuff?
It says, "Brothers and esteemed fathers," Paul said, "listen to me as I offer my defense." When they heard him speaking in their own language, the silence was even greater. Then Paul said, "I am a Jew born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, and I was brought up and educated here in Jerusalem under Gamaliel. I don't know why they have all these crazy names for cities and people back then. As his student, I was carefully trained in our Jewish laws and customs. I became very zealous to honor God in everything I did, just like all of you today. And I persecuted the followers of the way, hounding some to death, arresting both men and women, and throwing them in prison. The high priest and the whole council of elders can testify that this is so. For I received letters from them to our Jewish brothers in Damascus, authorizing me to bring the Christians from there to Jerusalem in chains to be punished. As I was on the road approaching Damascus about noon, a very bright light from heaven suddenly shone down around me. I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Who are you, Lord? I asked. And the voice replied, I am Jesus the Nazarene, the one you are persecuting. The people with me saw the light, but didn't understand the voice speaking to me. I asked, what should I do, Lord? And the Lord told me, get up and go to Damascus, and there you will be told everything you are to do. I was blinded by the intense light and had to be led by the hand to Damascus by my companions. A man named Ananias lived there. He was a godly man, deeply devoted to the law, and well regarded by all the Jews of Damascus. He came and stood beside me and said, Brother Saul, regain your sight. In that very moment I could see him. Then he told me, the God of our ancestors has chosen you to know his will and to see the righteous one and hear him speak. For you are now to be his witness, telling everyone what you have seen and heard. I know that was rather lengthy, but basically what this is, it's Paul's testimony. He was telling about what happened in his life. And so we never know when we'll be required to speak up for the Lord. And Paul had been worshiping in the temple when he was falsely accused of bringing a Gentile inside the temple. A riot followed. The captain of the Roman guard broke up the riot and bound Paul with chains. And then Paul asked the captain for an opportunity to speak up, and then Paul gave his personal testimony. So prior to chapter 22 and chapter 21, it talks about Paul being captured and all this stuff was happening. So he basically begs the captain just to let him talk for a second. And they give him the opportunity to speak. And instead of pleading his case or why they should let him go or whatever, he decides to tell them his testimony. And so, like Paul, the best thing that we have to offer our world is not learned arguments, but a personal testimony of what God has done for us. Revival will come to America not by powerful preachers and eloquent arguments, but when the church members start telling the story of what Jesus did for them. It's not going to come by people. We've got great speakers at this church. We've got great music at this church, and there's awesome people that go to this church. But the world is not going to be changed strictly because we got some guys that know how to talk 100 miles an hour, and we got a couple of guys on stage that can play a lead guitar. That's not going to cut it. What's going to happen, or what needs to happen, is for the actual people in the pews, or the chairs in our case, to actually step up and start telling folks, man, what God did for them. For example, if we look to advertisement on TV, we don't have PhDs explaining the value of the products, but you have housewives and children and the guy next door talking about toothpaste and cars and Snuggies. How in the world they're able to sell as many Snuggies? I even have one, and I don't ever even use it. It don't even cover my whole body. My feet stick out from under. It's useless for me, But my Lord, I was going to buy it because it had an Alabama logo on it. I actually got it for my birthday, I think. But, we look to TV and we see all this stuff, and they make it seem, they make you feel like you need this product, even when the truth is it's probably worthless. And we get sucked into buying these things just because it's somebody who can put it to good use. Well, the difference in our case is we actually have something that's of worth. And, it's a powerful reminder of what we should be doing with our witness for the Lord. Someone put it this way. He said, a Christian should talk to the Lord about his neighbors and then talk to his neighbors about the Lord. What that means is we ought to be praying about the people around us, and then we actually got to go talk to them about what God has done for us. And so the story of Paul's conversion must be important for it is found several times in the New Testament. You know, typically how we determine what a doctrine is it happens more than once. And so, you know, we get the doctrine of speaking in tongues because if you read through the book of Acts, it happens on 5, 6 different occasions. And although people don't want to believe in that anymore, and okay, that's on them, but we do because it's in the Bible. That's what the Bible teaches. And so it must have been important because it was in the Bible 3 times in the book of Acts alone. It is found in the 9th chapter when Luke tells the story from his historical perspective. It is told again in Acts 22 and where Paul defends himself before a Jewish audience. And it's told again in Acts 26 where he defends himself before the Gentile Roman governors Festus and Felix. What some names, great names, Festus and Felix. I feel like I was watching the Addams Family earlier when I was reading about these guys. Uncle Festus. That just sounds like some kind of Addams Family guy. But, you know, we also find a reference to this conversation twice more in Paul's letters, once in Philippians and again in 1 Timothy. And so if God found it so important to put it in the Bible this many times, then obviously giving a testimony should be important to us. If it's important to God, it ought to be important to us. And so tonight we're going to look at or learn about being an effective testimony for Christ. And so to be an effective testimony for Christ, what do we got to do? Well, the first thing, if we look to what Paul did, he established common ground with his listeners. Paul began by finding common ground with those with whom he wants to share his testimony. In verse 1, he says, "Brothers and esteemed fathers, listen to me as I offer my defense. When they heard him speaking in their own language, the silence was even greater." And so Paul begins by telling them that he was once just like them, and then he was talking just like they talk. You know, it's not like us going up to, you know, some French guys and speaking in English and they have no clue what we're talking about. We're not going to be an effective witness if they can't understand what we're saying. And so the first thing that he did is he built common ground with these people. He let them know that he's just like they are, or he was in the same place that they're in, and he's no different than them. And he was talking to them on the basis of, man, I'm just like you, but this is what happened to me. And so he begins to give his testimony. The second thing Paul did, he didn't glorify his past life of sin. He gave a recollection to let them know what he had been through, but he didn't actually glorify the so-called glory days, as most people like to call them. You know, sometimes when you hear a testimony these days, you don't really know if they're giving a testimony to the glory of God or they're just trying to come up with how much cool stuff they did back then. You know, we're like in a contest to see who could sin the worst. You know, who were like, well, you know, I used to drink. Well, my God, I was on cocaine, so I got you beat. You know, when people are giving testimony, that's the way it feels like sometimes. Yeah. I've been in prison for 47 years for murdering my mom, you know. Like, exactly. And so it seems like we're just basically trying to figure out who has sinned the worst instead of letting folks know really what God did for us. And that's what Paul didn't do. He said in verse 3, Paul said, "I am a Jew born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, and I was brought up and educated here in Jerusalem. And as his student, I was carefully trained in our Jewish laws and custom. I became very zealous to honor God in everything I did, just like all of you today. And I persecuted the followers of the way, hounding some to death, arresting both men and women, throwing them in prison. The high priest and the whole council of elders can testify that this is so, for I received letters from them, our Jewish brothers in Damascus, authorizing me to bring the Christians from there to Jerusalem in chains to be punished." Then if you keep reading on down to verse 19, he says, "But Lord, I argued, they certainly know that in every synagogue I imprison and beat those who believe in you, and I was in complete agreement when your witness Stephen was killed, and I stood by and kept the coats they took off when they stoned him." And so, if you don't know the story of Stephen, Stephen was just a godly man who he was brought there to be stoned, and you know, he looked up in the heaven, and the heavens opened up, and he seen, you know, God sitting on the throne, and then they stoned him, and he died. Well, Paul was right there. Paul was the guy that took his coat off of him so they could stone him to death. And so he's telling, he's telling God, he's like, you know, I don't understand how I can go and talk to these people because, man, they know this is where I was, and this is what I've done, and they're not going to accept me or what I have to say. And so he's kind of arguing with them. But Paul tells of his past, but he does not glory in it. He's not happy about it. He's not excited about it, but he has to tell them because most of them are probably there watching him do it. And so the same thing kind of goes for us. You know, it's important to tell others what we're going through, what we've been through, what God pulled us out of, but we shouldn't boast in those things and compete over, you know, who was the better sinner, so to speak, because that's not what Paul did. And the next thing is Paul does not promise a life of ease to those who believe. Unlike what you might hear from preachers today, Paul's life for Christ wasn't an easy road to take. Paul was he was struck blind, nearly killed, was arrested and beat with rods, all for proclaiming Christ. He was a martyr for his faith. He didn't have it easy. Of course, back then, pretty much nobody had it easy unless you were like the king. I wouldn't want to have lived back then. It would have been horrible. No iPads and, you know, no iPhones. Horrible life. No internet. I mean, thank God for Al Gore, because now we have the internet. No, nothing. And so they had it rough as it was. And so if you read through the Bible and you see kind of what these people were going through, you know, all this wealth, health, and prosperity message that preachers are preaching these days, it doesn't fit, because, you know, Paul wasn't getting rich doing what he was doing. The 12 disciples, man, they weren't getting rich by following Christ. You know, we have guys on TV now that, not to name any names, but it rhymes with Joseph Prince. He claims that that if you're saved, basically you shouldn't be poor. If you're saved, you should be rich, and if you're poor, then something is wrong. Basically, is his argument, and because he seriously believes that being a Christian brings prosperity, which it does, but not necessarily here on earth. And so, you know, you can't. The Christian message is supposed to be for everybody. God made it for everybody. So, if in His claim, if you're poor, then it doesn't apply to you, then that's not for everybody. So what are you going to tell a poor man? You're going to not lead him to Christ because he doesn't have money? It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit. And that's not the way that it is. And so nowhere in the Bible does it ever teach that that it's always going to be easy. And there's going to be struggles and hard times, and people need to hear that. People need to hear that, you know, what you were going through maybe when you first got saved. Like, I'm going to be honest with you. Most people, when they get saved, they feel all great while they're at church, and then when they go home and reality sets in. You know, it's like as soon as you get home and you get alone and you're by yourself and you're trying to go to sleep, and then it's like you get the midnight booty call text. You know, you get the you know, you come home and, you know, wherever, if you still live with your parents, you know, maybe your mom's already nagging you for whatever, or you go to school and your teachers are on you or your professors are on you. And it's just like, you know, we think that we get saved and all of a sudden our life is supposed to be awesome. And we're just going to go through life just being awesome. That's not always the case, man. Do what?
That's when you get slammed.
Exactly. When you think that you're invincible is the first time the devil's going to come in and hit you harder than he's ever hit you. Because nobody is invincible. So there's going to be struggles and hard times, but, you know, some pastors preach that, you know, if you're saved, that you should be rich, but it's just not that way. And what Paul tells his listeners that being saved changed his life, but it does not tell them that things have always been great since he was saved. He didn't say, you know, I just wanted to tell you how the Lord has blessed me materially. He didn't say that, you know, my tent building business has just blown up and I'm a millionaire now. You know, he wasn't proclaiming about, I don't even know if he really had a tent building business. You know, maybe they built shacks or whatever. I don't know what they lived in back then. But yeah, he had a Birkenstock. He had some old Jesus sandal business, you know. Yeah, Jerusalem cruiser business. And he wasn't telling them how much money he was making just because he got saved. But what he does tell them is that it's the power of Christ that makes us different. Every conversion story is as dramatic as that of Paul's, but every testimony is a before and after account of the transformation of a human life by Jesus Christ. Every testimony that you give, it's an account for what happened in your personal life. I mean, nobody can argue with you about what happened in your own life. If anybody should know what happened in your life, it ought to be you. And so, a man with an argument is not at the mercy, or a man with a story is not at the mercy of a man with an argument. If you've got the experience, if you lived it and you've been there, there's nothing they can do or say to take that away from you, because it's your life. You were there. And so Paul described the man that he was and the man that Christ had enabled him to be. And Paul was not saying how good he was or what he had done, but how good Jesus was and what he had done. Although in his witness he clarified that it was Jesus who had changed him. If we look back in verse 6, it says, "As I was on the road approaching Damascus about noon, a very bright light from heaven suddenly shone down around me. I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, 'Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?' 'Who are you, Lord?' I asked, and the voice replied, 'I am Jesus the Nazarene, the one you are persecuting.' The people with me saw the light, but didn't understand the voice speaking to me. I asked, 'What should I do, Lord?' And the Lord told me, 'Get up and go into Damascus, and there you'll be told everything you are to do.'" And so Paul's life is displayed the changes that have been made in his life, and so should ours. You know what Paul was doing? He was on his way to kill Christians. That's what his job was. He was set up to murder Christians. They didn't want them. They didn't want us around. The Roman Empire had nothing to do with us. They were just killing us all. And so Paul was on his way to persecute Christians, and then on his way there, Jesus shows up and was like, "Hey, you're not going to do that anymore, and you're going to start doing what I want you to do." And that's what he started doing. That's what Paul is telling them. And so he's telling them about the change that Christ made in his life. As soon as he met him, his life changed. And we ought to be telling the people the same thing about our lives. The last thing is Paul presented his conversion as fact and not a feeling. Paul's story was based on facts, things that others could attest to, not just how he felt. It's not always a feeling. You know, so we show up to church and we get goosebumps on our arms and we think, "Ooh, you know, Jesus is cool, and I got some little goosebumps, and I'm good now. I'm going to go home happy." But Paul had some cold, hard facts about what God had done for his life. He said, "I was blinded by intense light and had to be led by hand to Damascus by my companions. A man named Ananias lived there. He was a godly man, deeply devoted to the law and well regarded by all the Jews of Damascus. He came and stood beside me and said, 'Brother Saul, regain your sight.' In that very moment I could see. Then he told me, 'The God of our ancestors has chosen you to know his will and see the righteous one and hear him speak. For you are to be his witness, telling everyone that you have seen what you have seen and heard.'" And so we too should be willing and able to tell our stories at any given moment. When if we look over in Luke chapter 8, it says, "Return to your own house and tell what great things God has done for you." He was talking to a man he had just healed. And he said, "Man, go to your house and tell them all what just happened for you." You know, go there and everybody. And the Bible goes on to say that, and he went his way and proclaimed throughout the whole city what great things Jesus had done for him. He didn't just go home and tell his wife or kids. Man, he was running the streets rampant, telling them what God had done for him. And then Peter warns believers in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15. It says, "But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and always be ready to give a defense to everyone who asks you a reason for the hope that is in you with meekness and fear." What does that mean for us? That means at any given moment, we got to be ready to share Christ with somebody. Man, you never know who's going to walk up to you and ask you about your faith or ask you about your beliefs or your religion, man, and especially in the times that we got right now. I mean, we got some crazy people in this world. You know, we got this whole gay Chick-fil-A saga going on. We got folks showing up at theaters and blowing up the joint. I mean, we live with some crazy people. I mean, they need a hero. They need to know that there's somebody out there, man, that can fix the funk that they're in. Yes, and it's Derek in his green costume. No, but it's, we have to always be ready to give to give a defense to everyone who asks us. Man, people are going to come at you every day. Man, they don't believe the way that we believe. That's known fact. They're straight up going to argue with you until they're blue in the face. It doesn't matter. Most of those guys would argue with the fence post, and it wouldn't matter to them because they just ain't going to believe that God is going to do anything for them. But we can't back down. We've always got to have answers for the reasons why we do what we do, or the reasons why we believe what we believe. And that's why it's so important to be studied up in the Word and studied up and reading our Bible and praying and seeking God, because you never know when that person is going to cross your path. It could be at school or at work. It could even be at church. I mean, just because somebody shows up to a church building doesn't mean that they're saved. Christians get a lot of people calling us hypocrites because they see people that really don't even go to church at church doing things they shouldn't be doing. That's what we're here for. We're supposed to go out and get those guys. They're supposed to be here. We're supposed to be helping those people. But man, everybody needs to have their testimony ready and willing to give at any given moment. So, what I encourage for you guys is, I'm not like requesting everybody get up here and like give their testimony because, except for Victoria, she has to next week. I'm just kidding. Tori's nervous about talking to people. Yeah, just go write something down. Just make it up, Then we could write a song about it. It could be famous. We could be popular. You know that really happened, right? Somebody wrote a fake testimony, wrote a song about it. Hillsong recorded it, and it was all fake. Yeah.
That was crazy. Awesome song.
I know, right?
It was.
Healer. The song Healer by Hillsong. That guy made up a fake testimony. Yeah. They were mad about it. Great song even still. Yeah, was it cancer he said he had?
Yeah, but I mean, he was so deep and down into lies and stuff that he literally became physically sick. He didn't have cancer, but I mean, it tortured him.
So there you go. Don't lie about your testimony. But nobody knows your life better than you. So, I encourage you guys, man, always be ready to tell somebody what God has done for you. It's easy to tell what God's done for you, even if you weren't into alcohol or drugs and all that stuff. I mean, God's still done things for you. Whether it be maybe you just grew up in a good Christian home and everything's been fine your whole life. Well, that's an awesome testimony that God did that for you, and God can turn it around for them and make their home life just as good as yours is. And so, I didn't live a life I didn't go clubbing and drinking and partying, and I never did that growing up. Huh? Maybe that one time. But, I didn't live that lifestyle. I wasn't that kind of kid when I was growing up. I didn't really want to hang out with anybody. I really didn't hang out with anybody until high school when I met these guys, and that was all downhill from there. So at any given moment, we need to be ready to give our testimony. So I just encourage you guys, man, to maybe if you don't know the words to say, maybe when you're at home and just sitting around doing nothing besides being on Facebook, maybe you should just get out a pen and paper or computer and just type out what you think. Let God speak through you and talk to you, and type out what God. Everybody should have notes on their phone or whatever. Keep it with you, and when somebody shows up, man, pull it out. It don't matter if you read it off of a piece of paper, as long as it's coming from your heart. I read off of an iPad every week. It's still my own thoughts and my own opinions. That doesn't matter. It's but we always need to be ready to share Christ with somebody. And with that, I'm done. But tonight, before we get out of here, I was told that we have a special surprise for somebody. If y'all somebody want to go pull that out real quick, like. being that it is Kate's 18th birthday, we have took it upon ourselves. Actually, I didn't have anything to do with this. Jessica and Elizabeth have taken it upon themselves.
Is it bigger? Yeah, right there. Just wait for it. Close your eyes.
You know you should never close your eyes and hold out your hand. You just never know. What's going on back there? What? Sing what? Oh, we can? So being that it is Kate's birthday, we wanted to do something special for her tonight. And so, happy birthday. Opera style? That's right, opera style. What are y'all doing back there? We can't sing until you're ready. It would defeat its tradition. Really? I talked for like 20, 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah. 47 inch?
Yeah. We got you to 55. Mm. Ooh. Hey, Joe, you're going to need some aloe vera because you just got burned. Yes, sir. Well, we had a special surprise for Kate, but apparently she's not going to get it till tomorrow. Oh, God. You should have bought a bigger one.
Dave was waiting impatiently over here, and y'all fell asleep.
He's grandpaing it.
That's the dude that falls asleep during Avengers.
What are y'all starting a fire over? What's going on back there? We have a cookie cake for Kate for her 18th birthday. That's a lot of candles, man. Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Caitlin. Happy birthday to you. You're not going to get your wish because you didn't blow them all out.
Don't spit on it.
Hey, I could have told you that was going to happen.
Are you kidding me? I bought trick candles?
Yeah.
Spark. We're never going to get to eat this cake. It's going to catch on fire. Yeah, right. So anyways, feel free to get some cake. I believe some folks are going to Aztecas when they leave